A legal showdown underway over President Trump's deportations of hundreds of Venezuelans to El Salvador over the weekend. President Trump invoked a 200-year-old act that gives the president wartime powers to deport undocumented immigrants with little to no due process.
A federal judge temporarily blocked the deportation, saying it is unclear if the Alien Enemies Act applies, but the flights took off anyway. John Fenoglio reports.
Shackled, their heads shaved, and shipped out of the country. Hundreds of Venezuelan immigrants in the U.S. deported to a mega prison in El Salvador.
We removed in one day over 200 dangerous people, including MS-13. It was the right thing to see. And I see the video that President Bukele put out. It was a beautiful thing.
The Trump administration claims they were violent gang members, but the deportations have put the Trump White House squarely at odds with a court order issued before at least one of the planes had taken off. A federal judge ordered the flights be turned around Saturday after questioning the president's use of the 1798 Aliens Enemies Act, the centuries-old wartime law that allows deportations with little to no due process. The last time the U.S. used the act was during World War II to incarcerate tens of thousands of people with Japanese heritage, including U.S. citizens.
I do think we are slipping closer and closer to a constitutional crisis.
The American Civil Liberties Union claims the Trump administration broke the law when it defied the judge's order Saturday.
So we think the Alien Enemies Act cannot be used in this context. But even if it could, what I told the judge today was that there must be individual due process. If a person does not believe they're a member of the gang, can show that, then they're not subject to the proclamation.
Attorneys for the Department of Justice, representing the Trump administration, arguing Monday that no deportation flights left the U.S. after the judge issued his order, and that the other planes were already in the air beyond the U.S.'s jurisdiction.
I can tell you this, these were bad people. That was a bad group of, as I say, hombres.
Also arguing the administration is only bound to court orders that are in writing, not verbal ones issued from the bench.
We removed terrorists. That should be a celebration. We removed terrorists from this country, and I stand by what the president did.
But at this point, it seems like the administration is simply walking into court and telling a federal court they can't look at the evidence, they can't stop what they're doing, and we see constant public statements from administration officials criticizing federal judges, saying they don't have authority.
That federal judge wants answers to his questions about what the Trump administration knew about his order and when.
Well, guys, so I was having this very interesting conversation with my MAGA brother, actually. And we were talking about the planes that were supposed to turn around because the judge ordered the Trump administration to bring back the close to 200 Venezuelans that were pretty much kidnapped and taken to one of the most dangerous prisons in El Salvador. And, you know, obviously there's a lot of debate going on if the planes were already leaving, you know, I don't know, flying already, taking off by the time the order came about. I'm not going to get into all those details, but what I'm going to say is this. I was telling him that it's very, very concerning that we're getting to the point where we're facing a constitutional crisis. And he was like, there's no constitutional crisis. This judge, you know, he's a partisan judge. This, you know, he's just ruling in a political manner or way. And he has no standing to stop the president. And I'm like, bro, I want to ask you something. You say this lower court judge, you know, he's meaningless, right? Pointless. Why go to the court in the first place, right? So if anyone is suing the Trump administration in the lower courts, why is the Trump administration sending his lawyers? If they don't have the standing, why not ignore the courts in the first place? They don't ignore it because they know they have to follow the rule of law. And the rule of law in the Constitution establishes, obviously, 3 branches of government, and they have, obviously, this checks and, you know, and balances system. So they have to comply with the law. They have to comply with the Constitution. And I'm going to ask you, what are you citing? You know, what is your foundation? Do you have any law that you want to quote? Do you want to quote an amendment saying that the executive branch is just over everyone else and they don't have to listen, they don't have to comply, they can do whatever they want? Can you just help me a little bit here? And he couldn't obviously say anything, but he kept insisting they have no standing. This is a lower level court. if you want to talk about the supremacy clause, when it comes to state law and federal law, of course, because of the supremacy clause, the federal law should prevail if there is a conflict between the federal government and a state government. Then you can't have those conflicting laws and have the state prevail. Then at that point, the federal law is going to prevail. The same happens with the government when it comes to the federal branch, or just the federal government in general, I should say. If you have the executive branch in conflict with a lower level court, at the end of the day, the courts should prevail, because the only way, based on the law, the rule of law, and based on the Constitution, for the executive to be able to overcome this adverse ruling is not to take justice into its own hands. It's actually to appeal the ruling to a circuit, appeals court, or eventually all the way up to the Supreme Court. That is the path legally and constitutionally. It's not just saying, oh, this is a partisan judge. Oh, this is a lower court. The judge has no standing. I believe that, in good faith, if you're a Republican and you're listening, please, in good faith, just try to open your mind for a second. I'm not asking you to just give me credit and to take me at face value. Let's read a little bit of how the Constitution works, how the law works, and why this is not even about Trump. Why this is dangerous for democracy, dangerous obviously for our country as a whole, and how this could affect obviously our Constitution, how this goes against the Constitution, and we shouldn't open this door. We're opening Pandora's box if we allow Donald Trump to go over the courts and to start ignoring judges, orders, just because we believe that these judges are partisan, they were named by Biden or by Obama, even though a lot of them have been named by Trump or by Reagan or any other Republican, president at some point. That really shouldn't matter that much. What should matter if the case has, merit, if there's a legal base, if it's, the Constitution is supporting obviously the decision that has been made or not. And at the end of the day, the main thing here is that if you're not in agreement with a lower court decision, you just don't go ahead and do whatever you wanted to do in the first place. You just appeal. You follow the law. You follow the process. So anyway, before we get to the videos, let me share this screen here with you. Look at this. When the executive branch is in conflict with the judiciary, particularly with a lower federal court judge, the Constitution provides a clear process for resolution favoring the judiciary's authority over legal interpretation. Let me read that again. The Constitution, not the judge, not Democrats, not Biden, not Kamala Harris, not Gavin Newsom, not AOC, not Bernie Sanders. The Constitution, listen to me, the party of the Constitution, you should pay attention to this, right? The Constitution provides a clear process for resolution favoring the judiciary's authority over legal interpretation. Here is how it works. Number 1, judiciary power over the executive. Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution grants federal courts the power to interpret laws. The Supremacy Clause, Article 6, Clause 2, establishes that the Constitution and federal laws, including court rulings, are the supreme law of the land. The executive branch must comply with judicial rulings even from lower federal courts unless they are overturned on appeal. Executive defiance, look at this. If a federal judge issues an order against the executive branch, the president and their administration are expected to comply. If the executive disagrees, they can appeal to a higher court, typically a circuit court of appeals, or ultimately the U.S. Supreme Court. The executive cannot simply ignore a lawful court order. Doing so could result in contempt of court and a constitutional crisis. So who should prevail? Well, legally, the judiciary prevails because the courts have the power to interpret and enforce the Constitution and laws. However, in practice, enforcement depends on executive compliance. If a president refuses to follow a court order, the judiciary has no direct enforcement power. They rely on other branches such as the Justice Department, U.S. Marshals, or even Congress to uphold the law. So this is a very, very important thing to just, keep in mind, guys. I know that you may want to support Trump. I know that you want to take care of the border. I am down to remove all criminals, people that are, like non-citizens. with due process. If you don't like how the law works right now, we have to change the law. And this is one of the things I've been saying all over again, day in and day out on my Spanish podcast. What in the world happened to the border bill, right? We're dealing with this problem of this influx of illegals, and they're opening prisons and they're opening mental health institutions. They're sending their worst, the criminals and traffickers and drug dealers and rapists and whatever, killers, everything, right? The worst of the worst. So Trump wanted to just close the border. He just didn't want Biden to do it, when Republicans and Democrats had been working for a long time on a Republican, generated border bill, the James Langford bipartisan border bill, which Trump absolutely 100% killed around 11 months ago, close to a year by now, just because he didn't want Biden to have such a victory during an election year. The main thing is that now just they're ignoring the courts. And for all we know, these 200 people from Venezuela, we don't know who they are. This is not a good thing. 200 people, they claim that these people were from the TREN de Aragua, gang, pandilleros, right? Gang members. But we don't know that. I did literally ask my brother, how do you know these people were drug dealers or gang members? How do you know that? This is a person who tells me all the time that we need the Second Amendment. We can't give up the Second Amendment or even change it. We cannot amend the Second Amendment because this was given by our founding fathers. We don't give up our rights ever. If the government can obviously turn tyrannical, right? You don't want to green light everything that they want to do. That's why you need these checks and balances. This is why you need the judiciary to obviously be able to interpret the laws, and you need Congress to actually make the laws so that then the executive can enforce them. With 2/3 of the majority in Congress, they could actually overturn a veto, just for instance, or the courts should be able to also stop any executive order that is deemed unconstitutional or illegal, because that's what the courts do. I just don't get it, how people cannot see that we have this real crisis and that we're going down this road, which is leading us in a very, very dangerous direction. So I just wanted to share a little bit of that background in terms of how the government's supposed to work and how some of the arguments I'm getting from the MAGA world, both in my Spanish podcast or, even with some close friends or relatives, it's just not adding up. It doesn't make sense. And whenever you ask them to just provide the proof, what are you basing these arguments on or these decisions? How do you get to support Trump on just bypassing the courts? What's the legal theory or foundation for this? There's none. They know they have none. It's just like, well, you know how he ended the call? He ended the call telling me, well, go enforce it. Actually, I had that here. Check this on the examples of couple of times where we've had like legal crisis. Check here on historical examples, the one from Andrew Jackson. Check this. Andrew Jackson and Worcester versus Georgia, 1832. John Marshall has made his decision. Now let him enforce it. This was a rare example of the of executive defiance. And what I want to point out with this is that this is how he ended the call, and I told him, are you really supporting this position that if the courts rule against Trump, even all the way up to the Supreme Court, are you down or fine with him just defying the court order and just saying, hey, I have the Department of Justice, I control the military, what are you going to do? You think a couple of marshals are gonna come and try to arrest me when I have the whole army here protecting me? Because do you think Pete Hegseth is going to comply with a lower court order or with a circuit of appeals order or a Supreme Court order if Donald Trump tells them, block him? Do you think Pete Hegseth is really going to go against Trump and support the actual Constitution in the Supreme Court if they rule against Trump? I'm not so sure about that. There's a reason Trump chose, Pete Hegseth, which was absolutely 100% unqualified, not even close, remotely close to a meritocracy, kind of a selection. The same with Kash Patel, highly, grossly, underqualified. The The same with Pam Bondi, definitely not the person that seemed to be right for the job, because she seems to be highly partisan. Pam Bondi was recently asked, what do you think about Elon Musk, call to impeach judges? The first thing that came out of her mouth was, well, Elon Musk is, he's a very good friend of mine. He's a great person. That's the first thing she said. And that's the wrong answer. When it comes to the law, when it comes to you being the Department of Justice, the director, the secretary, attorney general, right? The last thing you want to have on your mind if there is a conflict between, somebody within the executive branch and some other branch of government, the last thing you want to be thinking, this person is a good friend of mine and I trust them, so we are going to back them. Instead of saying, hey, we don't make decisions based on a tweet. We take every matter seriously, and we're gonna look into it at some point when something comes, across my desk, or I'm gonna have my people look into it. But don't start by saying, oh, he's a great friend of mine and he's so disappointed and frustrated with everything that's going on with the country right now, because immediately you just confess to being biased. So that means that you should recuse yourself from whatever investigation, maybe appoint a special counsel that you guys said that you couldn't appoint. That was illegal, but you should recuse yourself from any process that involves Elon Musk, because Pam Bondi just confessed to being a very close friend. They were best friends forever. He's a great person. He's a good friend of mine. Oh, good to know. Good to know that that's the first thing that comes to mind whenever Elon Musk calls for a judge, a judge's impeachment. I am just in shock right now that even Republicans, even MAGA, followers are taking this too far, allowing Donald Trump to, get away with everything he wants to get away with and do whatever he wants to do, because it's just not right. And it's not going to be good. And this is my point. This is the main thing. Like, this is not good for any political party. You don't want Joe Biden, or Kamala Harris, or Gavin Newsom, if he becomes president at some point, or Kamala. You never want them bypassing the courts. Because if Biden decided to arrest 200 Oath Keepers or 200 Proud Boys, right? And, I don't know, get them in a plane and send them all the way to El Salvador without any due process, just invoking an obscure, weird, old 1800s law, claiming that, hey, the executive, because we are over everyone else and we have the absolute power, and I am the executive of the executive, like Caroline Leavitt will always call Trump. He is the executive of the executive branch, and no lower standing, judge will stop him, right? Stuff like that, some MAGA Republicans say. But imagine if Biden had done something like that and arrested 200 Proud Boys without any due process, and then he sent them to El Salvador. This would be nonstop. The protests, these people would be storming the Capitol. This would be, we need to take back our country. We have to fight like hell. The government has gone tyrannical. This is why we need the Second Amendment. They just wouldn't take it. They would say that this is absolutely unconstitutional, that this is why the founding fathers gave us the Second Amendment, so that we could have more than enough guns and ammo to oppose a tyrannical government, right? So there is no way that they would have taken that if Biden had done such a thing, invoking a weird, like I said, obscure 1800s law that is rarely being used other than during actual wartime, like during World War I or II, that I think has been invoked only twice, if not 3 times, only during wartime. This is not wartime here in the U.S. Maybe you want to call, the immigration issue, some type of war. We're fighting a war and this is some immigration warfare or something, right? But anyway, if Biden had done the same thing, they would be going crazy. I'm pretty sure they would be out in the streets. They would be breaking into the Capitol. They would be storming the Capitol. They would be storming the White House. So I just can't stand the double standard because I know that would be the case. And we've seen it before, right? Things that Trump gets away with, Biden would never even remotely, get away with, not even 1 or 2 of the 100 things that Trump can get away with, just because he is who he is, right? What are we doing as a country right now? This is not good. And I'm down for Trump appealing every single decision all the way up to the Supreme Court. As much as I don't like that the Supreme Court is pretty much Republican, it's MAGA world right now too, that's the law of the land. So as long as he continues to process and goes from a lower court to an appeals court to a circuit court, and then all the way up to the Supreme Court, I'm fine with that. But if he wants to bypass that, then we do have a problem. If he wants to challenge a lower court order saying like, hey, this didn't come from the Supreme Court, so I'm just going to ignore it. Didn't come from the Supreme Court because you didn't challenge it, because you didn't appeal it. You haven't followed the process. Oh, I don't think we can wait. Well, I don't think that's how the law works. Remember, Republicans, remember MAGA people. This could also be done eventually if we allow this to be a precedent. If we allow this to be now the law of the land or the way to proceed, then you can't complain if Trump loses in 2028 and Gavin Newsom wants to do the same and completely bypass the courts. This is why it's so dangerous and risky. But I'm going to leave it at that. My name is Daniel Aranzamendi. This is the Aranzamendi podcast. If you made it this far, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. I want to know what you think if you're, in support of Trump completely bypassing the lower courts just because they are partisan judges, because they are partisan hacks, and they have no standing, right? These are lower court, low-level judges, unimportant judges. So do you support that at all? Or do you really think that Trump should still follow the path, the legal path, and follow the Constitution and appeal these rulings and maybe take them all the way to the Supreme Court? And then if he does so, is that the right way to do it? That's my contention. That's what I believe, because that's what the law of the land is right now. So at the end of the day, it's not my opinion. It's not about your opinion. It's about what the Constitution says about federal law. If you don't like the law, you have to get Congress to legislate. If you don't like the Constitution, you have to get Congress or the states to propose an amendment and then have the states vote to appeal, to pretty much amend whatever part of the Constitution you want to amend. That's how it's done. It's just not bypassing or using loopholes or just using the power of the executive because you control the military and you control the Department of Justice and the FBI, and who's going to come against me, who's going to enforce it. Like in that Jackson, instance that we were reading about. Crazy times, guys. Like I said, Daniel Aranzamendi, this is the Aranzamendi podcast. Please follow Aranzamendi Podcast Español. If you know Spanish or if you have any Spanish-speaking friends, Hispanics, please send them to Aranzamendi Podcast Español. And thank you for being here. I'll catch you on the next podcast, okay? Take care.